All Middle-earth is within his reach now.
The conclusion of Rings of Power Season 2 satisfactorily resolves a number of plot issues, addresses important queries, generates more theories, and establishes expansive storylines for Season 3. Many have been speculating about the Rings of Power's future since the first season concluded. The second season of the Rings of Power addressed this theory with a more assured narrative that focused on the creation of the Lord of the Rings Rings of Power as Sauron used his seat to rise to the top of Middle-earth's power structure and the Free Peoples rebelled against his darkness. The climax of this tale was reached in the second season finale of the Rings of Power, where the majority of the cast gathered to protect Eregion from Adar's army while Celebrimbor made his last stand against Sauron. Elrond and the elves stave off an attack of orcs while Sauron fights Galadriel for the 9 Rings of Men as part of his Rings of Power scheme. As the Rings of Power Season 2 draws to a close, the stranger learns who he really is. The dwarves of Khazad-dûm glimpse the burning doom that lies beneath them, and the men of Numenor deal with their ongoing power struggle. The stranger's identity was arguably the biggest twist revealed in the conclusion of the Rings of Power Season 2. Many have speculated that the stranger was an early form of Gandalf the Grey as he was shown to be one of the Astari in The Lord of the Rings. There were doubts about how Gandalf might have existed in Middle-earth's Second Age. But this was reinforced by a number of sardonic allusions, and Easter eggs to the itinerant Grey Wizard. The stranger is revealed to be Gandalf in the Rings of Power Season 2's finale. Despite the seeming disrespect for Tolkien's original works, this was expected given the frequent and overt allusions to the famous wizard. That being said, there were always alternative ideas that suggested the stranger and his dark wizard counterpart were actually the two seldom mentioned blue wizards from Tolkien's writings. All the same, the stranger's identity as Olorin, the Second Age's take on Gandalf, was verified by the Stewar's references to him as Grand Elf, the discovery of his staff, and the dark wizard's confrontation. The other major storyline of the Rings of Power Season 2's ending surrounded the fate of the 9 Rings of Men. At the onset of the episode, the rings were in Galadriel's grasp as she looked to escape Eregion while saving as many lives as she could. Eventually, Sauron catches up to her and confronts her. Amid more offers of crowns and partnerships, taunts, and torments, Sauron and Galadriel clash until the former gains possession of the 9 rings. He demands Galadriel give him her ring, Nenya, before she jumps from a cliff above Eregion. Later, it is revealed that Galadriel survived her fall, begging the question of how. The answer to this has been seeded throughout the Rings of Power Season 2, the Elven Rings of Power. As had been shown before this, the Elven Rings, specifically Galadriel's, have been shown to possess immense healing powers. Galadriel held the ring as she jumped, which likely helped her survive the fall. Afterward, the combined powers of hers and Gil-galad's ring saw Galadriel's wounds dealt by Sauron's weapons heal. The Rings of Power's 9 rings set up Sauron's The Rings of Power Season 3 story. Sauron's plan is nearing its final stages. As alluded to, Sauron's ending in the Rings of Power Season 2 saw him gain possession of the 9 Rings of Men. These rings were the object of Sauron's desires in the latter half of the Rings of Power Season 2, after successfully crafting those for the dwarves. In gaining the 9 Rings of Men, Sauron's story for the Rings of Power Season 3 has been established, linking to the Lord of the Rings Nazgul. Now that Sauron has the 9 Rings of Power, he will seek out the Lords of Men he desires to bend to his will. In the Rings of Power Season 3, this plot will unfold. Sauron will find those to give the rings to, leading them down the path of becoming the 9 Nazgul seen in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Who these subjects will be remains to be seen, but Sauron's plan will undoubtedly involve establishing the ring wraiths, as well as crafting the Lord of the Rings One Ring. Adar also dies in the Rings of Power Season 2 before Sauron and Galadriel's pivotal encounter. The character is killed by his own orcs as was commonly suspected throughout Season 2, who fell under Sauron's power. Shortly before this, however, Adar's character took an unusual turn. Adar returned to his fair elf form in the Rings of Power Season 2, Episode 7, after gaining Galadriel's ring. This assisted him in seeing the folly of his actions in giving up so many of his Uruk offspring. The power of the ring helped him realize this, turning his heart into a desire to forge a truce between the elves and the Uruk. Although Adar still wishes to defeat Sauron alongside Galadriel, he vows to recall his army to Mordor and lead them into an age of peace alongside the other races of Middle-earth. Unfortunately, this truce does not last as Adar is killed by his own orcs. The siege of Eregion came to an end and the elven city was destroyed in the Rings of Power Season 2 finale. But many of its occupants were able to flee as a large number of dwarves showed up to battle the orcs. The elves withdrew to a secret valley in the misty mountains to the north of Eregion, led by Elrond, Gil-galad, Arendar, and Galadriel. This valley will eventually become Rivendell, Elrond's stronghold that is extensively described in both The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Will the Balrog return in the Rings of Power Season 3? The Balrog's return is imminent. The Rings of Power Season 2's finale opened with an epic scene in which Durin IV confronted his father. Durin III had succumbed to the power of the ring and opened a pathway through the mountain into a chasm filled with mithril. However, within this chasm was also the Balrog, the demon born of shadow and flame that has long been teased as the doom of the dwarves. That said, the Balrog did not stay for long, teasing its return in the Rings of Power Season 3. The Balrog was supposed to demolish Khazad-dûm in the Third Age according to Tolkien's Lord of the Rings series. The vast dwarven kingdom has been teased in the Second Age to become the crumbling state of Moria by the Balrog. Given the somewhat altered timeframe and revised order of events in the Rings of Power. More than any other season, the Rings of Power's Season 2 finale included hints that the Balrog would most certainly return for Seasons 3 and beyond. Another plot point that was resolved in the Rings of Power Season 2's ending was that of Elendil's. Despite the ending of his arc, major foundations were built for his future story in the Rings of Power Season 3. This came in the form of a new weapon, first teased in the Rings of Power Season 2, Episode 5. Elendil received the Sword of Narsil in the Rings of Power Season 2's ending, a weapon given to him by Queen Miriel that signifies him as one of the true Númenórean faithful. This weapon is one of the most powerful in the entire franchise, as evident by its future in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Not only does Narsil become a symbol of Elendil's strength as he becomes the High King of Gondor and Arnor, but it is eventually used by Isildur to cut the One Ring from Sauron's finger during the War of the Last Alliance. Later, it is reforged into Andúril, Flame of the West, for Aragorn during the War of the Ring. Back over in the Middle-earth lands of Run, more about the Dark Wizard was revealed in the Rings of Power Season 2's ending. Before Gandalf's identity was revealed, the wizard had to save the Stewars, Nori, and Poppy from the Dark Wizard and his servants. Although the Dark Wizard states he wishes to help Gandalf defeat Sauron, the heroic Istari comes to realize it is only so his dark counterpart can fill the void afterward. This leads to a brief confrontation in which the Dark Wizard tries to kill the Stewars before fleeing. The rivalry between Gandalf and the Dark Wizard is thus left over for the Rings of Power Season 3, begging the question of whether the latter is Saruman. After all, the dynamic between the two in the Rings of Power is similar to that of Gandalf and Saruman in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. The Dark Wizard could still be one of the aforementioned Blue Wizards, but it seems as though an early version of Saruman is also present as of the Rings of Power Season 2's ending. The loss of Celebrimbor is arguably the most heartbreaking element of the Rings of Power's second season finale. Celebrimbor is slain by the Dark Lord following his captivity by Sauron to learn the whereabouts of the Nine Rings. The Rings of Power Season 2's true meaning honors the best of all elven smiths, even though this finale is appropriately tearjerky given Celebrimbor's tragic up to this point. The real message of the Rings of Power is that light, not power, triumphs over darkness, as Celebrimbor stated at the Siege of Eregion. By the end of the season, Celebrimbor's remarks still hold true because many of the show's plots are infused with Sauron's darkness. Though the conclusion of the Rings of Power Season 2 was depressing, the show's protagonists never stop reminding the viewer, as well as themselves, that Celebrimbor's advice was sound and that darkness can only be vanquished by light. This leads to increased opposition from the free peoples of Middle-earth in Season 3. Before the credits roll, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more movie madness. What did you think of today's video? Let's discuss in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.